We just learned what the language service can do. Now imagine handing those capabilities directly to an agent. No custom glue code, no bespoke integrations, just an MCP server that exposes language skills as tools to your agent. Hi, I'm Rob Fulkrod, a lead technical trainer at Microsoft. In this session, we'll cover connecting agents to the Azure AI Language Service using MCP. We'll start by understanding the Language MCP server and what it offers, and then walk through how to connect it up and use its tools from an agent. So let's get started. So up to this point, we've already seen two concepts side by side. We have seen the idea of MCP servers. We've talked about those in an earlier session when talking about large language models. We saw that MCP allows us to advertise a series of tools that large language models can then reason about and select and invoke. And we also saw that there is this language processing system, right, the Azure language capabilities that could be used in place of large language models. So now we're going to bring those two ideas together. We may have a large language model running inside of an agent, but that model may be an incredibly large, maybe expensive model that we're using because of the variety of things that it may have to perform. But some of these tasks that we saw in the language service, PII, entity recognition, language detection, may be something that we could offload. And so let's bring the two of those together. And that's what the Foundry folks have done. They've taken the Azure language capabilities and pre-built an MCP server that you can enable on any of your agents. And so the process, once that's configured, is that a user is going to send a prompt to an agent, or some system is going to send that prompt to the agent. The agent then determines what has to be done and reasons and says, maybe the thought process is, I've got to strip out some sort of PII. What tools do I have available? It checks the MCP tools to find the best match. And the agent then calls that selected MCP tool, passing in the relevant document or text that has to be used. The MCP server processes the incoming request, the appropriate response coming back from the language model, from the language system, and then those are blended together into the response for our user. Where we're going to find these is that these are inside of the tools collection. So when you're building an agent and you swing down into the tools, you're going to find a huge collection inside the catalog. The one that we're looking for in this case is the Azure. The one that we're looking for in this case is the Azure Language in Foundry tools. Then it's a matter of selecting the tool and a little bit of configuration so that the systems can talk one to another. You'll supply the name of the project, and you'll supply perhaps the key or some sort of credential that it's going to be used. And then that's it. And then at this point, much like we were talking about with other MCP tools, there is this idea of ensuring that things like your instructions are in the right spot. Right, so here it says that we've got to make sure that we are specifying agent instructions to select the appropriate tool. Given that large language models, without giving them human characteristics, kind of think they can do a lot of things, right? If we say identify PII to a large language model that hasn't been set up with these tools, it knows what PII is and it can guess. However, these tools may outperform it in terms of speed or in terms of pricing. So we would need to give the appropriate instructions to say, hey, make sure when doing these tasks, right, and the three tasks that we saw in here, named entity recognition, PII detection, language detection, make sure that you're funneling those into the MCP server. All right. Not all overcomplicated, but let's give it a shot. Okay. So in here, we're going to go ahead and establish a quick little agent. We will then set up the MCP tool and then create a client application that tests it out. All right, let's try. So for starters, we are here inside of Foundry one more time. In the earlier example, we built ourselves a project and did all of that. So we're going to assume for the purposes of this demonstration here that you've got that already. We are on the Agents tab. We will just go ahead and click Create Agent in here. And for our quick agent in this case, we're just going to do, it's going to kind of a bare basic text analysis agent. It'll go ahead and build that for us. And there we go. Awesome. We will drop in some instructions here, starting off with just, hey, you're an AI agent that assists the user by helping them analyze text. And then, so what can you do? And if we ask something along those lines, right now we're getting a 100% unadulterated large language model view of the world. And it's like, well, I can do anything. Well, you name it, I can do it. Not really specialized in any of these things, right? But sure, I can do whatever you need. Fine, good starting spot. We're going to save this. We're going to swing over into the tools section, and this is where the MCP configuration is going to reside for our agent. So we'll go ahead and browse all tools in here. We will go to the catalog and look up our language. Spell language, there's a little irony there. Spell language correctly, and here we go. So we have the Azure Language in Foundry tools. Go ahead and create the configuration for that tool. It needs a name. Azure Language in Foundry Tools is fine, right? Nothing wrong with that. Descriptive is always better. And then we need the endpoint for our Foundry. And we can see right up here that we've got our demo Foundry 4790. So demo-4790, and we know the default for the resource, not the project. Remember that a single resource could have multiple projects, and we did the default naming before, so our full name there, demo 4790, a resource will be the name. It needs authentication. We can do key-based, although I will need to grab the key. I'm going to go over here, go ahead and grab that, and sneak back, and drop that in, and connect. We don't need to save any of that. Thank you for asking. Okay, so now we have both web search in here and Azure Language in Foundry Tools. If we were to swing, you saw earlier, I almost went straight to tools. You could have done that too, right? You could have built that generically for all the agents, and then here added it in. It is set up for all of the agents. So if I were to build a second agent in a moment, the configuration for this is already there. I would just have to include it as one of the tools. All right. So now that we have built said configuration, as we talked in earlier sections, if you're going to bring in a bunch of tools, you should have some instructions so that it understands the tool. And in this case, you're an AI agent that assists user by helping them analyze text. Use the Azure Language tool to perform text analysis tasks. I am going to go one step further just to be on the safe side here. I'm going to remove the web search capability. We don't need to test web search. None of the things that we're going to use will require web search. So there's no real reason to provide more tools than what we need. So we will take web search out, and we will save again so I don't forget. Okay. And let's do a new chat here, and we will give it a little bit of a prompt just to test it out. Identify the PII entities in this article and generate a redacted version. So that should use the tools for us. Okay. Now, the very first thing that happens is, hey, all of those tools that we have here are exposed by way of MCP. So as we have seen in earlier sections, we do have to approve that. So I will go ahead and say, yep, I will approve that this one time request has been approved. Beautiful. So now we have the PII entities that have been identified. We've got Bill, those dates, Bill, Paul have been identified. There are the dates and the locations there, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Seattle. And so we can then see a redacted version. Microsoft was founded on, not going to say, by childhood friends, boom, and boom, right? Looking good there. And if we were to dig into the logs, right, we will see in here that we have a call into the Foundry tool. So we can see the tool there, its call, and we can see the output coming back from the tool itself. Right. So that's a good start. But we should really take a look at this from a code perspective. Once we've built this agent, how do we call into it? I hope it's not much of a surprise after this video series. It's probably not going to be all that complicated. We will probably build some sort of client and build a prompt. So let's hop over there. So we have, let's see, what do we have here? We have ourselves a couple of code files in here. An environment file will probably need our project. Yeah, we need our Foundry endpoint. So I'm going to dip into the toolkit right here, make sure I grab project endpoint and replace it. Go ahead and do a quick little save there. Then take a look at our text agent. So the two namespaces that we're going to bring in, our default Azure credential, right, the way that we are authenticating, and the AI project client from our Foundry projects there. Starter, go ahead and then build the project client, pass in the endpoint, pass in the credential. And then from there, we're going to grab the Open AI client. Ask the user for a prompt, and then Open AI client responses create, pass in the role, and here again, pass in the name of the agent that we wanted to look up. And then get the response. Really, really straightforward usage here. So let's go ahead. Already been saved. We'll bring open the terminal. This is, we'll do a little Python for our text agent. We've already, in earlier examples, talked about making sure that we install all the dependencies and activate all of those. That's already done. You can assume for future demos that have already gone through that process. Right. And we'll say, hey, extract, out of the way so we can see a little bit more. Extract the named entities from the following text. Pierre and I went to Paris on July 14th. That's a little bit disappointing. Oh, yeah, that is disappointing. Okay. So, what went wrong on this one? We're gonna leave this in so you can all see what's going on here. If I had to guess, we're gonna swing back to our Foundry, and when we tested that exact same thing here, right, if I were to do this right here, same thing, we get this approval, right? And so our code sample right here, and in earlier samples, we have gone through getting that approval process and approving it. programmatically. We've done that before, but in that particular example, we didn't intercept that. We didn't listen for that particular response, and therefore nothing was approved, and we got a little stuck there. So I can approve this one here just once. We will get back the appropriate response. Life is good, right? So those are the things that were identified. So how do we handle that? We can either handle that in code, or we can swing over here to the tool itself. This is something we have not seen yet in any of this. And we can go into the tool once we've added it and go ahead and configure. Inside of configure, we can specify the tools, because every MCP server has a collection of tools. So we can set the ones that are allowed. Here, the default is never to auto approve. For the purposes of our demo here, we will auto approve all the tools. We'll go ahead and apply, and we will save. There we go, version 4. So then let's swing back and let's run this one more time. Luckily, there's nothing that we have to refresh on our local machine for that to happen. So we'll run it again. We will paste in the same prompt. And life is good. Now, from the engine, we've got our person, our location, our date, all set. Okay. Now, let's go a little bit further, because there will be times where you're going to have to do some troubleshooting, where you have to see who's doing what. So one of the systems that are in there kind of for debugging purposes is we do have the ability to not just take the output text, but to see what the model has given back and just dump that as straight JSON. So we're going to do the same thing one more time. Save. Run it again. And we'll do a slightly different prompt. Tell me what entities and dates are mentioned in this review and whether it's positive or negative. I booked my flight to Paris in July with Margie's Travel, and it was fantastic. So terminal selection, a nice little way of saying, hey, what we have over there in our selected terminal. So it's going to read through all of that and should give us a pretty nice analysis of what's happening. I think there's probably going to be close to 600 lines of stuff in there. So it read the first 400. There we go. Reading now 651. Y'all didn't want to hear me talk about all that. So here's what's going on. So you ran the text agent pi and got the full response back. So that was text agent version 4 was called into, backed by GPT 4.1. Okay. The input that's accurate there, right? And instructed it to use the Azure Language in Foundry MCP tool. So our execution flow here, it looked at the MCP tools and came back with a list of tools that were available. MCP call was into the extract entities and the data that it was returned. Looks good, right? So MCP call got the entities from text and retrying for date only, didn't come up with anything date specific. So it tried that twice. It's kind of an interesting idea, since we said, hey, look for dates, and it simply wasn't finding it. It doubled down to try that one more time. Still didn't get it. That's fine. Then looking for sentiment. Okay. In there, it returned a positive 1, which indicates success, and we've got our final message. Right. So nice set of responses coming back from the tool, telling us how the data was processed. All right. I hope that was helpful. Let's go wrap this up. All right. Let's check out how you're doing. So first and foremost, what is the primary role of the Azure Language MCP server? All right. And it is indeed to expose the Azure Language Text Analytics capabilities as MCP for agents. How does an agent determine which Azure Language MCP tool to call when processing a user's input? The agent matches the prompt tool descriptions received from the MCP server. One could probably argue, if your thinking was something about instructions, one could probably argue the addition of instructions would help in that regard. All right, this has been pretty quick, but what we've seen is combining these two really interesting concepts. The MCP concept that exposes tools along with an example of a pre-built language tool. The agent then gets to decide which tool selection. We don't have to hard code anything along those lines. There's a little bit of configuration inside of both the portal and your agent, but it doesn't really take a lot of code to make that happen. In this session, we plugged language skills straight into our agents over MCP. We understood the language MCP and connected to it, and we demonstrated it. Thank you for participating in this Develop AI Apps and Agents on Azure course. I hope you found the information about Language MCP Server helpful, and I encourage you to remain curious and continue exploring new capabilities. That's how you stay relevant. There are many ways to continue your learning journey, and I invite you to search for your next favorite topic on Microsoft Learn at aka.ms/learn.